You're listening to What's Contemporary Now, a show about culture and the people, places, and things that together make it up.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Sarah Richardson's biannual Beyond Noise is in the midst of rolling out its third issue, and the speed with which it's amassed a seriously competitive list of contributors and talent is worth paying attention to. Seemingly antithetical to most strategies for winning the game of earned media value, the magazine, or brand as she often calls it, has taken a different approach, one rooted more in consideration than real-time reaction, all while still managing to document the times effectively in a beautifully packaged box set composed of two separate volumes, Beyond and Noise. Today she tells us about the why it exists, why it's done so well so fast, and what it is she hopes for its impact on the future.
This is Sarah Richardson, and we're talking about what's contemporary now.
Sarah Richardson, you were born and raised in London, but what was life like before your first job in fashion at Browns, and what early influences shaped your formative years?
Growing up in London was incredibly inspiring. As you can imagine, you have access to pretty much everything. My mum loved culture and art, and we would spend most weekends in art galleries and museums. I've always been very fascinated, even as a kid, with people watching. I guess we all are. I was quite shy as a child, so I spent a lot of my time fantasizing and taking everything in around me. I guess I was very much inside my own head, and I loved being creative and whatever form that was. As I grew into a teenager and teens, looking at the punk kids, or the post-punk kids, I guess they were, in Kensington Market, and also equally fascinated by the well-dressed women in Knightsbridge, which wasn't very far from where I grew up. That was something that inspired me. I also studied part-time just before I went to work at Browns.
What were you studying?
I studied design part-time at Central St. Martin's, and then went to work at Browns, which was the Dover Street Market of the 90s. As their full-time window dresser across all boutiques. When I look back now, I realize how lucky I was to have this experience and to live in London that gave me such an opportunity at such a young age.
I feel like merchandising is obviously a form of styling, right? So at what point did you realize that that role was something you wanted to explore further and end up assisting Venetia Scott of all people?
I guess that was like dressing huge dolls, and really in a way was very much styling, but mannequins. And when the stylists used to come into Browns, Venetia, Carl Templer, Jay Powell, I was like, well, they do what I do, but we're real people and they travel around the world, and that has to be more fun. So I guess that was the idea. And I remember my father saying to me, why don't you become a stylist? And I was like, what's a stylist? And it was actually my father that told me what a stylist was. And then I looked into the pages of the Face magazine, and I remember Joe McKenna's work, and that always stood out to me. And it still does. I think he's an exceptional stylist. So I guess that was the beginning of it all. And then I saw a story that Venetia did in the Face magazine with Jurgen. It was called The Magic Show. It was like an unknown model, but it was like the idea of like circus acts outside in the countryside. And I thought it was so beautifully executed, and the narrative was really, really lovely. And that inspired me to ask Venetia if she needed an assistant, which she needed someone more experienced. And then that didn't work out, and she came to me, and that was the beginning of it all.
Before we get further into the fashion of it, I mean, obviously being a Londoner, it is such a storied city, both historically as well as culturally. And I did want to get your perspective on how you describe its identity today, because it's obviously shifted like every other place, and also how you see the role it plays on the global stage.
It's very different than it was when I grew up. There was much more diversity in terms of subcultures. You know, some people were inspired by 50s rock and roll, and there was psychobillies, and then you had goths, and then you had the punks, the post-punks, you had like the rave scene.
Well, you and I have certainly enjoyed good banter for years about the cultural politics and how they differ across the pond. So, given that you have made the decision to have offices in both New York as well as London when it comes to Beyond Noise, which we'll start talking about in a minute, can you kind of share with us how you view the differences between those two cities and the sort of things that you and I have discussed at length historically, anyways? Because it is always up for a good debate between the pair of us, and I love to hear your point of view.
London is a little bit more, as you and I have debated, liberal in comparison. There's this need to be different and rebellious, like cousins, New York and London, more than, say, Paris and London in a way. We're much more similar in a way. I feel more at home when I'm in New York than I do to, say, when I go to Italy or Paris or Belgium. It feels like we have more of a similar outlook.
Yeah, I think those two cities are the closest in terms of social mobility, right? Because there's less cultural bureaucracy in terms of how people can move on up in the world. That is a beautiful segue to move into the kind of genesis point of Beyond Noise, because you've consulted for designers, styled countless campaigns, served as fashion director at ID, contributed to top titles. But what made you want to launch your own magazine right now? And how would you describe the world that you're looking to build with this title?
I've been in the industry for such a long time, and you meet so many people and you learn so many things. And there comes a point when, of course, you respect everyone else's point of view, but at the same time, you know that you would do things yourself in a different way. I respect the perspectives of other people, but I know what inspires me, what makes me dream, and how I feel. And what I feel is in the air at a particular moment. That doesn't mean it's necessarily true for everyone, but it's, like I said, I have a confidence about what things mean to me and how I feel about that. I've greatly admired the likes of Azadine Eliad and Lee McQueen, Hedi Slimane, for example, who have their own perspective and like to do things their own way. And Katie Brand, who has created incredible publications with very much her own point of view, which is very different to mine, but I very much respect them. You have to have like strong conviction in your own beliefs. I find this kind of impulse very exciting, and it's what pushes me forward. And I hope pushes the team at Beyond Noise forward.
And what do you credit for the anchors beyond the team? Because obviously that's an amazing type of support to have. But it's been my experience that when bringing something out into the world that doesn't exist prior to your vision or idea of it being so, there are those challenges to making it real, right? Because you have to navigate other people's reception of it, and you can't be anchored exclusively in these external sources of validation. It very much has to come from within.
No, and I guess that's what I mean. I have the confidence in my own conviction and what are my own beliefs. You know, I've always liked what I liked and kind of wanted to put that out there in the world. So I guess that it's the conviction of your beliefs and your self-belief and your confidence in what you're doing.
I mean, if you look at the first issue, you already had Victoria Chiretti, Mona Tugard, Io Edeberry, Vanessa Friedman, amongst others on the covers. Issue 2 followed up with another impressive lineup, having Gigi Hadid, Nadia Lee Cohen, Margaret Qualley. You're looking at issue 3 with a lineup that I'm not sure another magazine has had all in one issue for quite some time when it comes to the people who have lensed those images, from David Sims, Jürgen Teller, Willy Vanderpeer, Mario Sorrenti, Craig McDean, Grace Sorrenti, Hedi Slimane. I mean, the list goes on. So what is it that you credit for your ability to have built such a strong offering in such a short period of time?
I've been in the industry a long time, and I've got to know some incredibly talented people along the way who also know incredibly talented people. And for me, that's the beauty of a publication. It's built on community. And again, my team is so important to me, and it's such a big part of what Beyond Noise is. And I'm very fortunate to have an incredible team. I also think the fact that Beyond Noise gives space to artists, creatives, to be free to express themselves, which I think is enticing in today's world of everything being very controlled, which it is. And for me, I don't really believe in that. Although I have a vision for Beyond Noise, I do my best not to limit creativity. I'm not a publisher running a business. I'm a creative giving space to other creatives that I respect and admire. Whether I'm working with them personally or not, I love bringing teams together. I think that's such a beautiful experience. And when the work comes in, a lot of the times I'm more excited about what other teams do than what I've done myself necessarily. I also understand firsthand, being a creative, how much work, thought, time and costs go into a shoot, and I respect the limitations across the board and try to find a balance. Of course, we have to be a business to survive, but that's not what drives me. It's also a space to be creative and to give opportunity.
I've often said that contributing to this project has been both an absolute pleasure as well as a learning opportunity, particularly the kind where one learns to work within someone else's vision, because obviously you've said no to a number of ideas numerous times, making it very clear that you know exactly what you want and also what you don't want. So talking a lot about the team and how much you've credited them for the success of the magazine, what went into your decision-making process when putting together the team that you wanted by your side when building a brand like this?
Firstly, I hope I've said yes more than I've said no. As you know, I respect you. I think you've got an incredible mind and such an understanding of culture from so many different aspects. I'm just very clear on what it is that Beyond Noise is. Instinctively, I know it's not, then that's when a no comes. Many of the team are people I've worked with or have known for a long time. My husband, Richard, who is the CEO and publisher, built the business with me and is my rock, and we share a lot of the same vision. He's also a bit of an architect and is able to create structure and manage multiple projects and disciplines with me, while understanding that I have a very clear creative vision. But he also understands the necessity of the creativity of beauty.
Well, that's a fun one to unpack. I think a lot of people, some prefer and some prefer not to work with personal relationships, such as your actual life partner. So how has that been?
I mean, we're like anyone that works together, forget about being husband and wife. We're also creatives together. So sometimes fully aligned, and other times he'll push me and be like, oh, do you think that's right? And I listen to him. And, you're someone who's been a dear friend of mine for a long time. And you and I also, not always agreement, but then we push each other to find something that's the middle space. And I usually think that's when it works best. And Alice Leckens, our fashion director, has worked with me in one capacity or another for 16 years. She started up as my intern. She's also a rock and someone who is very honest and loyal in terms of her communication and, a creative being as well. So, it's great to have people like that around you that you believe in and you believe in their perspectives, but there's a certain trust and loyalty between you. I think that's when you can create something really quite beautiful.
Let's talk about the pillars, because the magazine isn't limited to its pillars, but it certainly has its own, which are, of course, fashion, culture, art, beauty, tech, and the environment. Fashion, beauty, and culture are self-explanatory, but what was it about the art world that felt essential to include? And what do you think about tech or AI and the sustainability efforts that sometimes seem in tension with them?
Well, I start with art because that's something, like I said, probably was my first love. As a child, it was something that I spent a lot of time at galleries with my mother. So I really enjoyed art before I even knew what fashion was. So it's something very close to my heart. Yeah, I've maybe not had the opportunity to experience it in such a deep dive way before Beyond Noise. And it's an opportunity for me to discover more and express this love. We have a brilliant art editor called Magnus who introduces me to upcoming art, but it's also given me the confidence to reach out to people like Isabel Albuquerque, whose work I absolutely love.
Well, this is a perfect opportunity to make that jump then. Let's unpack some of your favorite features in this issue, because the conversations and subject matter feel especially relevant to the moment. And a biannual is essentially a time capsule, right? So let's talk about what you love that's coming out.
It feels wrong to pick up particular things because, every single piece has been a personal journey. Personally, really enjoyed reading and the lead up to the feature on Daisy, the recycle robot of Apple. We also did a brilliant manifesto by Lisa Jackson, who's the VP of Apple Environmental Initiatives. And that's really interesting as well.
Yeah, because I feel like most people don't know that Daisy exists.
Yeah.
It's a very cool concept that Apple does, yeah.
And she's beautiful. She really is a beautiful robot, I guess, machinery to look at. And we've done some really wonderful photographs of her. So both Hedy and I felt very strongly about giving this opportunity to emerging designers. And Alex Kasani is the model. And, how often do you get to give that kind of exposure to emerging designers? It's not something that's easy anymore. The feature that accompanies the story in Volume Noise, which you, Ray, discussed, is what it means to be a young designer today, and is a great read and a personal favorite. And then, of course, there's the supplement takeover by David Sims, which is really special. I feel so privileged. He did the slipcase takeover as well. I've always admired David's work as an artist.
Something that we didn't really touch upon when I had asked about the pillars, which I'm very curious to get your take on, is, of course, the tension between things like technology or AI and environmentalism, right? Because at this point, we've not yet arrived at a stage in development where AI is green, for lack of a better term. Whether or not, it's the energy required or the use of water required for something as basic as ChatGPT. So how do you navigate the seeming contradiction between those two very relevant cultural subjects that are included in the magazine's pillars?
I guess to simplify it, tech is our future. We're in the midst of a revolution, which I find very exciting. I know that some people are a little bit more nervous of it, of the repercussions and how it can get out of hand. But I find technology myself very excited, and I want us to delve more into this. Of course, we have environmental responsibilities, but humans are smart and we know how to problem solve. And I think the sooner that we embrace the future of tech, the sooner we can find these solutions.
And why did you want to run them as separate volumes within a box set rather than have a single printed magazine? Because obviously, to your point of cost when it comes to production, sustainable or not, that is quite a luxury investment in making a magazine.
I guess firstly, I thought, well, how would I like to have a magazine today? Which one? It's not a throwable magazine. I like the idea of something that you keep, you look back on. I even have editions of very old IDs that I had, which I keep at home, and they're kind of a little bit faded and a little bit torn. And I think that the idea of keeping them pristine is really important for me. And also, I guess I'm very much a visual person as well. So I like the idea of separating the fashion from the editorial features. I'm the kind of person that if the fashion well's at the back, I start looking at the magazine backwards. So if you want to have a visual experience, you can look at Beyond, and it has no text at all. It's separated by beautiful graphics by Gareth Haig, who's an immense talent. And then you have Noise, which is everything else. And it's all the cultural components and it's all the text. I mean, there's visuals as well, but with the level of talent that we had in terms of writing as well, it's an incredible read.
And something else, speaking of read, that comes up quite often in the language used by Beyond Noise and yourself is, of course, this idea of the modern woman the brand caters to. And I know it's a hard question to answer because, modernity is quite diverse, more now than ever before. But what is a modern woman anyway?
From my own perspective as a woman, what I like to feel that I can be today that maybe my mother, or especially my grandmother, wasn't able to be, is having your life, taking your life in your own hands, confidence to be yourself and beat to your own drum. Really, women are approximately 50% of the population. I think there's only 2% difference. And yet across the world, we still face marginalization, even in the Western world. For me, the modern woman represents what is or should be the woman of today. She can be a mother or not, able to run her own company, make her own career decisions, has interests beyond what is atypically regarded as women's interests, and instead might have interests in science, technology, politics, and yet still be interested in fashion and beauty. I guess being who we are and who we want to be without having restraints. That for me is the modern woman.
Beautifully said. And that brings us to our last and final question, which everybody has to answer. And that is, what is contemporary now?
Social media, of course, it has its dark side, but I also think on the positive, because I'm an optimist, that it shows and gives opportunity for everyone to see everything really that's going on, and what's contemporary now, beyond noise.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was great to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christopher.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What's Contemporary Now. A special thanks to our producer, Sasha Grinblatt. Audio post-production by Chase Coughlin with original theme music by Joseph Topp-Miller and Chase Coughlin of The Black Soft. And visual design by Aaron Meager and Graham Prentice. Subscribe now to be the first to catch new episodes each week. And if you've enjoyed listening, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for additional content and join the conversation. Let us know what you think is contemporary now.